The unexpected choice of detention bay of the Nexari warship hummed with alien energy. As Marcus Webb pressed his back against the cold metal wall, around him, 37 other human prisoners sat in rigid silence, their faces masks of barely contained fear and defiance. The ship's artificial gravity made his stomach churn, a constant reminder that they were no longer on Earth. 3 days had passed since the Nexari fleet had appeared over Luna Station without warning. Their crystalline vessels had moved through space like living entities, their hulls shifting between translucent and opaque as they surrounded the human outpost. The surrender had been swift and brutal. Marcus adjusted his torn engineering coveralls, his hands still shaking from the memory of watching his crewmates fall to Nexari neural disruptors. He was nobody special, just a fusion reactor technician who spent his days calibrating power cores and arguing with stubborn maintenance bots. While others around him were decorated officers and elite soldiers, he was simply the guy who kept the lights on. The detention bay doors hissed open with a sound like escaping steam. The temperature dropped noticeably as she entered, her presence commanding immediate attention. Commander Zyra Vex stood nearly 7 feet tall, her scaled hide shimmering with bioluminescent patterns that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. Her forearms moved with fluid grace, each ending in hands that could crush steel or perform delicate surgery with equal ease. The Nexari were apex predators evolved from ocean-dwelling hunters, and it showed in every line of her body. Her elongated skull housed a brain larger than any human's, while her silver eyes missed nothing as they swept across the assembled prisoners. She wore armor that seemed to grow from her skin itself, organic technology that responded to her thoughts and emotions. Marcus had heard whispers about Commander Vex during their imprisonment. She was the youngest fleet commander in Nexari history, having earned her position through a combination of tactical brilliance and ruthless efficiency. Her ship, the Devourer of Worlds, had single-handedly destroyed 3 human defense platforms. During the initial assault, she moved through the rows of prisoners with predatory grace, her footsteps silent despite her size. General Harrison straightened as she approached, his chest full of medals catching the harsh lighting. Colonel Matthews, hero of the Martian campaign, lifted his chin with defiant pride. Captain Rodriguez, whose strategic mind had saved thousands during the asteroid belt skirmishes, squared his shoulders in preparation. But Commander Vex walked past them all without a second glance. Marcus felt his heart stop as those silver eyes fixed on him. Up close, he could see the intricate patterns of scales that covered her face, each one shifting color in response to her mood. The air around her carried the scent of ozone and deep ocean, alien and intimidating. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made his bones vibrate. "You, human, stand." Marcus scrambled to his feet, his legs trembling beneath him. "Ma'am, I think there's been some mistake. I'm just a technician." For the first time since entering the detention bay, Commander Vex smiled, revealing rows of razor-sharp teeth. "I never make mistakes." Marcus Webb, the revelation of purpose he'd walked through. The Nexari ship felt like a journey through the belly of some vast sea creature. The corridors pulsed with bioluminescent veins that carried information instead of blood, while the walls themselves seemed to breathe with the ship's massive life support systems. Marcus stumbled along behind Commander Vex, his human eyes struggling to process the alien architecture that defied every law of physics he understood. "Your species fascinates me," Vex said without turning around, her voice carrying easily through the corridor. "You build machines to serve you, but you never truly understand them. We grow our technology, nurture it, become one with it." Marcus noticed that the ship's surfaces responded to her presence, brightening as she passed and dimming in her wake. "It's beautiful," he admitted, then immediately felt foolish for complimenting his captor's vessel. Vex's forearms moved in what might have been the Nexari equivalent of a shrug. "Beauty is efficiency. Efficiency is survival. Your human concept of aesthetics separate from function is quaint." They entered a vast chamber that served as her private quarters, though. The space seemed to shift and change as Marcus watched. The walls displayed a 3-dimensional star map that rotated slowly, showing the current positions of both human and Nexari fleets. Red markers indicated human territories, while blue ones marked Nexari space. The red was being steadily consumed. By the blue, "We're losing," Marcus said, the words escaping before he could stop them. "Your species was doomed from the moment first contact was made," Vex replied matter-of-factly. "The Nexari Collective has absorbed 47 different civilizations over the past millennium. Each one brought unique technologies, perspectives, and capabilities into our collective consciousness." She gestured to a section of the star map where dozens of different colored markers mingled with the blue. "The Corvani gave us quantum tunneling technology. The Zephyrians contributed their mastery of gravitational manipulation. The Ithic provided biological enhancement techniques that allowed us to integrate organic and mechanical systems." Marcus felt a chill run down his spine. "And what will humans contribute before you absorb us?" Vex turned to face him, her silver eyes reflecting the starlight from the map. "That depends entirely on you, Marcus Webb." Before he could ask what she meant, the chamber's walls began displaying images. Marcus recognized them as surveillance footage from Luna Station, but the perspective was strange, as if viewed through multiple sets of eyes simultaneously. He watched himself working in Engineering Bay 7, his hands moving with practiced efficiency as he rerouted power to the station's failing shield. "Generators, you worked for 18 hours straight during the siege," Vex observed. "You're commanding." Officers had fled to the evacuation shuttles, leaving the station's 12,000 civilians to die. But you stayed. Marcus remembered that day with crystal clarity. The Nexari bombardment had overloaded the main reactor, and someone needed to manually stabilize the fusion core, or the entire station would have exploded. "I was doing my job," he said quietly. "No," Vex corrected, her voice carrying a note of something that might have been respect. "You were doing what your species does best. You sacrificed yourself for others without thought of reward or recognition." The images shifted, showing Marcus crawling through damaged conduits while plasma fires raged around him. In the footage, he looked terrified but determined, his hands never stopping their work even as the station shook itself apart around him. The Corvani would have calculated the probability of success and abandoned the station when the odds fell below acceptable parameters. Vex continued. The Zephyrians would have saved themselves and justified it as preserving their genetic superiority. The Ithic would have consumed the civilians to gain the energy needed for their own escape. She paused, studying Marcus with those unnervingly intelligent eyes. "But humans do impossible things for impossible reasons. You saved those 12,000 lives knowing you would likely die in the process." "I didn't die," Marcus pointed out weakly. "No," Vex agreed. "Which makes you even more interesting." The test of character the next 3 days passed in a blur of impossible experiences. Commander Vex had Marcus assigned to her personal technical staff, a position that apparently involved following her around the ship and trying not to die from exposure to alien technology that operated on principles humanity had never dreamed of. The Nexari crew treated him with a mixture of curiosity and disdain. Some, like Subcommander Kral, viewed him as nothing more than a primitive pet that Vex had decided to keep for her amusement. Others, particularly the younger crew members, seemed genuinely fascinated by his presence and would ask him questions about human culture and technology through translation devices. Marcus learned that the Nexari Collective wasn't the monolithic entity he had imagined. While they shared certain technologies and resources, individual ships retained their own personalities and command structures. The Devourer of Worlds was considered an elite vessel, crewed by the most promising young officers in the fleet. "Why are you showing me all this?" Marcus asked during one of their sessions in Vex's quarters. They had been reviewing tactical data from the siege of Luna Station, analyzing human defensive strategies with the cold efficiency of a postmortem examination. "Because," Vex replied, her attention focused on a holographic display showing the station's final moments. "I need to understand how your species thinks. Every civilization we've encountered has had predictable patterns of behavior. The Corvani prioritize logical solutions. The Zephyrians value individual achievement above all else. The Ithic operate on pure instinct and hunger." She manipulated the display, zooming in on Engineering Bay 7, But humans, you defy classification. Your actions don't follow any logical framework we can identify. Marcus watched himself in the hologram, seeing his past self make the desperate decision to manually override the containment fields. Maybe that's because we're not trying to be logical. We're trying to be good. Define good, Vex said immediately. The question cut Marcus off guard. How did you explain morality to a species that had conquered 47 civilizations? Doing the right thing, even when it hurts. Helping others, even when they can't help you back. Protecting the innocent, even when it means sacrificing yourself. These concepts have no survival value, Vex observed. They actively work against self-preservation and genetic continuity. That's what makes them good. Marcus replied, surprised by his own conviction. Any species can be selfish. Any species can put their own survival first. But choosing to be better than your instincts, choosing to care about others more than yourself, that's what makes us human. Vex was quiet for a long moment, her bioluminescent patterns shifting to deeper blues and purples. Show me, she said finally. Show you what? Prove that your species is worth preserving. The collective has decided that humanity poses too great a threat to be allowed to continue expanding. Your unpredictability makes you dangerous. But if you can demonstrate that this goodness you speak of has practical value, she didn't finish the sentence, but Marcus understood. This wasn't just about his own survival anymore. This was about the survival of every human in the galaxy. The next morning, Marcus got his chance. The ship's bioneural networks began experiencing cascading failures, starting in the lower decks and spreading upward toward the critical command systems. The Nexari crew worked frantically to isolate the problem, but their organic technology was too interconnected to contain the damage. It's a cascade failure in the primary neural pathways, Subcommander Krell reported, his normally composed demeanor cracking under stress. The bioneural matrix is rejecting the quantum processing cores. Vex's patterns flashed angry red. How long until total system failure? 6 hours, maybe less. We need to evacuate the ship. Marcus had been listening to the technical discussions with growing understanding. The Nexari bioneural networks operated on principles similar to human neural systems, but with quantum processing elements that his species had never developed. The incompatibility was causing the organic components to reject the artificial ones, like an immune system attacking a foreign invader. I might be able to help, he said quietly. The bridge fell silent. Every eye turned to him, and Marcus felt the weight of their stares like a physical presence. Human technology is primitive. Krell sneered. What could you possibly contribute? Sometimes, Marcus said, thinking of every jury-rigged repair he'd ever made, every impossible fix he'd accomplished with nothing but spare parts and determination. Primitive is exactly what you need. The moment of truth. Nexari Engineering Bay was a cathedral of living technology, its walls pulsing with the rhythm of a massive heart. Bioneural conduits snaked across the ceiling like arteries, carrying information and energy to every part of the ship. But now, those same conduits were turning black with infection. The cascade failure spreading like a cancer through the ship's nervous system. Marcus stood before the central processing core, a massive organic structure that resembled a cross between a brain and a quantum computer. Its surface was covered in millions of tiny neural clusters, each one flickering with dying light as the failure spread. Your bioneural matrix is too perfect, Marcus explained to the assembled Nexari engineers. It's so efficient, so interconnected, that when one part fails, the failure propagates through the entire system instantly. Chief Engineer Tice, an elderly Nexari whose scales had turned silver with age, gestured dismissively with two of her forearms. Human technology is crude and inefficient. Your machines break constantly and require constant maintenance. Exactly, Marcus said, pulling out his multi-tool and beginning to examine the nearest neural interface. We learn to build redundancy into our systems because we know they'll fail. We accept that failure is inevitable, so we design around it. He had been studying the ship's schematics for hours, tracing the cascade failure back to its source. The problem wasn't in the organic components or the quantum processors individually. It was in the interface between them. where two fundamentally different technologies were forced to work together. The quantum processors are trying to operate at absolute efficiency. Marcus continued, his hands working to isolate one of the failing neural clusters. But biological systems aren't designed for absolute efficiency. They're designed for adaptation and survival. Commander Vex watched from the observation deck above, her silver eyes never leaving Marcus as he worked. "Explain," she commanded. "In human neural networks, we have something called neural noise," Marcus said, carefully inserting his multi-tool into the interface port. "It's inefficient, wasteful, but it's also what allows us to be creative, to make intuitive leaps too, solve problems in unexpected ways." He made a small adjustment to the quantum processor settings, introducing a random fluctuation pattern that would have horrified any Nexari engineer. "Your bioneural matrix needs to learn to embrace imperfection." The effect was immediate. The neural cluster he had modified began to stabilize, its bioluminescent patterns shifting from the angry red of failure to the steady blue of normal operation. But more importantly, it began to adapt, creating new pathways around the damaged sections. "Impossible," Tice breathed. "You're introducing chaos into a perfect system." "I'm teaching it to be human," Marcus replied, moving to the next failing cluster. "Perfect systems are brittle. They shatter when stressed. But imperfect systems, they bend. They adapt. They survive." For the next 4 hours, Marcus worked his way through the ship's neural network, introducing tiny imperfections into each quantum processor. The Nexari engineers watched in fascination and horror as their perfect technology became deliberately flawed, but undeniably more resilient. As the cascade failure slowly reversed itself, Marcus felt the ship's personality begin to change. The devourer of worlds had always been efficient, coldly logical in its operations. But now, there was something else, a spark of unpredictability, of creativity, of humanity. "Status report," Vex commanded as Marcus finished his work on the final neural cluster. "All systems stable and operating within normal parameters," Tice reported, her voice filled with wonder. "But Commander, the ship is different. It's making decisions I didn't program into it. It's being creative." Vex descended from the observation deck, her forearms moving in a complex pattern that Marcus had learned indicated deep thought. "You have given our ship something we have never possessed," she said to Marcus, "the ability to surprise itself. That's what makes us human," Marcus replied, exhaustion weighing down his words. "We're not the strongest species, or the smartest, or the most efficient, but we're the most adaptable. We survive because we can change, because we can become something more than what we were." The implications of what had just happened hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus had not just saved the ship, he had fundamentally altered the nature of Nexari technology, proving that human imperfection had value that their perfect systems lacked. "The collective will want to study this," Vex said slowly. "They will want to understand how chaos can create order. Then maybe," Marcus said, "hopefully they'll realize that humanity is worth preserving after all." The birth of something new. The Nexari High Command assembled an emergency session aboard the flagship Eternal Tide, their bioluminescent patterns creating a sea of shifting colors in the vast conference chamber. Commander Vex stood before them, her young form dwarfed by the ancient beings who led the collective. But her voice carried the authority of someone who had witnessed something unprecedented. "The human has fundamentally altered the nature of our technology," she reported, her words causing ripples of shocked color to flow through the assembled commanders. "He introduced chaos into our perfect systems, and they became stronger for it." Grand Admiral Nexus, whose scales had turned the deep purple of extreme age, spoke with a voice like grinding stone. "You allowed a primitive to contaminate our bioneural networks. This borders on treason, young Vex." "Respectfully, Grand Admiral," Vex replied, her patterns shifting to the gold of conviction, "I saved not just my ship, but potentially our entire technological paradigm. The cascade failure would have destroyed the devourer of worlds." Marcus Webb's solution didn't just stop the failure, it made our systems immune to it. She activated a holographic display, showing the ship's neural network before and after Marcus's modifications. The difference was striking. Where before the pathways had been rigidly geometric, now they flowed like rivers, finding new routes around obstacles and creating redundancies that hadn't existed before. The human concept of imperfection isn't a flaw, Vex continued. It's an evolutionary advantage. Their technology fails constantly, so they've learned to build systems that can adapt and survive. Our perfect systems are actually fragile by comparison. Fleet Commander Zara, whose young scales still held the bright blues of ambition, leaned forward. Are you suggesting we abandon our technological superiority for human primitiveness? I'm suggesting we learn from them, Vex replied. For 1,000 years, we have absorbed civilizations by taking their technologies and discarding their people. But humans might be the first species whose greatest gift isn't what they've built, but how they think. Marcus stood in the detention bay, watching through the small porthole as the Nexari fleet maneuvered around Earth's solar system. The sight should have filled him with dread, but instead he felt a strange calm. He had done everything he could. The rest was out of his hands. The door hissed open and Commander Vex entered, her patterns cycling through colors Marcus had never seen before. The High Command has reached a decision, she announced. Marcus braced himself for the worst. Extinction, integration. Vex replied, and Marcus caught something in her voice that might have been excitement. For the first time in collective history, we're not absorbing a civilization. We're joining with it. I don't understand. The collective has decided that humanity's greatest strength isn't your technology or your military might. It's your ability to find solutions that shouldn't work, to survive situations that should be impossible, to choose cooperation over competition even when it defies logic. She moved to the porthole, gazing out at the blue marble of Earth. We need that. Our perfect systems, our logical processes, our efficient solutions. They've made us powerful, but they've also made us predictable. We've become so focused on perfection that we've lost the ability to innovate truly. So what happens now? Marcus asked. Now, we learn from each other. Humans will join the collective not as conquered subjects, but as partners. Your people will help us understand how to embrace imperfection, how to find strength in chaos in return. We'll share our technologies, our knowledge, our vision of what's possible among the stars. Marcus felt a weight lift from his shoulders that he hadn't even realized was there. And the war? What war? Vex asked, her patterns shifting to what Marcus had learned was the Nexari equivalent of a smile. Partners don't fight each other. They explore the galaxy together. 6 months later, Marcus stood on the bridge of the Harmony, humanity's first joint human Nexari vessel. The ship itself was a marvel of cooperative engineering, combining human adaptability with Nexari biotechnology. Its neural networks pulsed with purposeful imperfection, creating a vessel that could think, adapt, and surprise even its own crew. Status report, Chief Engineer Webb. Captain Jennifer Torres commanded from the captain's chair, her voice carrying the easy authority of someone who had helped design a new kind of starship. All systems operating within acceptable parameters, Marcus replied, checking the readings on his bioneural interface. Though I should mention that the ship's AI has started composing poetry. Not sure if that's a feature or a bug. With this crew, Captain Torres laughed, probably both, through the viewports. Marcus could see the vast expanse of unexplored space stretching before them. The Nexari had shared their star charts, revealing thousands of worlds that neither species had ever visited. There were new civilizations to meet, new technologies to discover, new forms of life to understand. But more than that, there were new possibilities. Humanity had proven that perfection wasn't the only path to greatness. Sometimes, the most beautiful solutions came from embracing chaos, from finding strength in weakness, from choosing to be better than evolution demanded. The galaxy was vast and full of wonders, and for the first time in history, humans wouldn't face it alone. They would face it as part of something larger, something that honored both the Nexari drive for perfection and the human capacity for impossible hope. Set course for the unknown regions. Captain Torres commanded, "Let's go see what's out there." As the Harmony leaped into hyperspace, Marcus smiled. The future was uncertain, imperfect, and absolutely full of potential. In other words, It was perfectly human.